Alright, so this is really interesting news. See, over the last couple of days, there was quite a lot of talk about the upcoming rework of Mirage's skill Eclipse, and I think this seemingly small update will be absolutely huge for many Warframes out there, yet nobody seems to talk about that. So in this video today, we're gonna go over what exactly will change with Eclipse, how it affects all your favorite Warframes, and, most importantly, why the new Eclipse will make many Warframes much more endgame viable. Big shoutouts to all my generous channel members who help me keep the lights on, and now, let's jump right into it. Now, to anybody who is not aware, first of all, what even happened? See, as most of you are probably aware of, the skill Eclipse from Mirage is very strong when it comes to damage buffing or giving you damage reduction. Just by looking at the ability card alone, you can already see that the figures this enables have absolutely ginormous potential. However, there is a catch with it. Up until this point, Eclipse has been light level dependent, meaning the damage buff would only give you the full dose if you were standing in a very bright spot, and at the same time, the damage reduction that it could give you would only apply if you're really standing in the dark shadows. And it pretty much goes without saying that naturally this has been very inconsistent, which, at least for me, made this skill unattractive. But here's the catch. With the new lighting engine that is going to be added to Warframe very soon, this skill, this light level dependence, does not even work anymore. So Eclipse needed to be reworked, and after a lot of community feedback, the decision was made to turn this skill into a toggle so that you could switch between the light and the dark mode, the damage buff, and the damage reduction. Now, because of the fact that this would make the skill more reliable and therefore much stronger, the devs said that if they change it into a toggle, they would also have to bring the numbers down a bit to sort of get it in line, you know, to nerf it a bit so it doesn't get too OP. And the community was fine with that. However, in the last dev stream they announced that there was a change that a lot of the community did not like. See, previously the damage buff from Eclipse was a final damage multiplier, and with the new Eclipse, they said they want to change it to just a normal base damage multiplier. Now, I don't want to get too much into the numbers right here because I'm sure that it would bore a lot of you, but to put it very simply, what that means is the type of damage buff that you would have gotten beforehand as a final damage multiplier would be much greater in practice than just a base damage multiplier that they planned to make it from the next update on. Unsurprisingly, the community was not too fond of this change, and there was a lot of negative feedback, not only in the forums but also under my last dev stream recap, so the devs actually listened to it, took the feedback to heart, and in the recent dev short that was uploaded yesterday, they announced there will be changes. So let's go over that right now. First of all, I want to say huge shoutouts to the E for actually listening to our feedback and coming up with changes according to what the common sense among the community apparently is. I personally think this is very good news, not only for Mirage, but also like for the entirety of the community, you know, that the devs are actually listening to what's important to us about the game. And naturally, Eclipse from now on is probably going to be a much better skill because of that. But what exactly happened? In the recent dev short, Rebecca and Steve announced that Eclipse is not going to be a base damage multiplier, but they actually, you know, paddle back and keep it as a final damage multiplier, just like it is right now. Just, of course, this then will mean that the numbers will be pulled down a little bit more then. Also, they announced that the nipple piercings from Styanex's new deluxe skin will be toggleable, so everybody who was talking about that, I think, good for you. But mainly, I think that the new Eclipse is going to be in a great spot, and it will have some big changes coming up to many Warframes in the game and their respective playstyles. So after you've smashed that like button to support the video, big cheers for that by the way, let's take a look at what this new Eclipse change will mean for the overall Warframe meta. Now, as probably everybody of you knows, Eclipse is Mirage's Helminth skill, meaning you can put it onto other Warframe via the Helminth system. And within the whole Helminth ecosystem, Eclipse has always been in a very special spot because, while most people probably used it for the damage buff, Eclipse is and has always been the only Helminth skill that actually allows you to get damage reduction. And unlike armor, for example, the damage reduction from Eclipse also affects shields too, so not just health. So naturally, when you want to go into Steel Path with a, let's say, more fragile frame that cannot take as many shots, having Eclipse just for the damage reduction alone would have been huge. however it never was. Reason for that being, of course, since it was light level dependent, it was always super duper inconsistent, because if you want to stay alive, you absolutely have to be able to rely on your skill, and it cannot fluctuate between minus 75% damage reduction and just like 3% or whatever. That's why, even though old Eclipse existed, nobody really ever used it for damage reduction, because it just ended up getting them killed anyway. However, now, with the new upcoming Eclipse, since it's going to be a toggle where you can decide yourself when you want to take the damage buff and when you want to take the actual damage reduction, the tankiness buff, this becomes much more viable for a lot of frames in later game content, to the point where many, especially older frames that came out way before the introduction of Steel Path even, these frames with the new Eclipse might get actually endgame viable. However, they're not the only ones, and let's look into some very special frames that will also super duper love the new Eclipse. Starting out with our favorite shield tanker, Hildren. Even though we've already seen quite some changes in terms of how much damage shields can take before they go down, with the new Eclipse, having additional damage reduction stacking on top of that even will make shield tanking an actual viable thing in Steel Path, not only for Hildren but in general for frames that have a little bit more shields, maybe for example Harrow. And even if you don't have any shields, additional damage reduction is always welcome, especially for tanky frames. Let's think about, for example, Inaros, right? The guy has 10,000 HP, you can give him a lot of armor, you can put adaptation on top of that, and now imagine that on top of all these layers of damage reduction, you could add Eclipse on top of that to give him even more damage reduction. Inaros will be able to just face tank everything. I can't wait to test this one out. And you know what's also going to be super funny? If you use the damage reduction from Eclipse on those Warframes that already have a damage reduction skill on their own, because different sources of damage reduction stack multiplicatively with one another. So just imagine having a Mesa with her 3 on, giving her 95% damage reduction, and from the 5% damage that you just take, you get another damage reduction percentage from Eclipse, and then you have adaptation, and then you have armor, and like, I want to test out Tank Mesa and see how many effective hit points she can actually get with all those layers of damage reduction on top of each other. Same, by the way, goes for Gara, Satrine, Neja, and all those others that have damage reduction on their own. But, and this one is a really big but, there is one frame in the game for whom this new Eclipse change, it's like it was tailor-made just with her in mind, and that frame is Dagoth. Here's what I mean. The special thing about Dagoth is her third skill, Grave Spirit. As I also explained in my recent Dagoth video, what this skill does is it protects you from death. If you have it on and then you die, what happens is you don't die, but you become actually invulnerable for a certain time period, and after this invulnerability period ends, you're alive again, but you have to wait a couple of seconds before you can activate it again. So it's not like it keeps you permanently protected, just one time, then you're invulnerable, and then you have to wait for a bit. And this is the perfect use case for the new toggleable Eclipse version. Now, what you can do is, while you're in this invulnerability time period, you switch to the light version of Eclipse, giving you a huge damage bonus, and after the invulnerability time period ends and you have to wait a couple of seconds, you switch to the dark mode, giving you tons of damage reduction. That makes it then way easier to stay alive until the countdown ends, and then you can switch on your invulnerability again, switch to the light mode again, deal damage, rinse and repeat. Especially for Warframes that have abilities that make them very tanky for a short period of time, but not forever, this is a great skill because you can switch between the protection and the damaging version of Eclipse in sync with the protective ability of the Warframe, so that you always deal the damage while the Warframe protects themselves with their own ability, and once that runs out, you switch to dark mode and get protected by Eclipse while you wait for your own protection skill to recharge again. Dagoth is only one example for this. Another one would be Harrow with his 4, which makes him temporarily invincible, Valkyr in case you're running a build where her talents are not constantly on, and I'm sure there are tons of more examples that I cannot think of right now. By the way, if you like, then let me know in the comments down below how you would use the new Eclipse with the toggleable versions where you can switch between light and dark mode, because I would be really interested to see what you come up with in terms of which frames it might be a great addition on. And if you now want step-by-step instructions on how to mod any Warframe to make them super strong, then you shouldn't miss this video right here. Another big shout out to Niels V, Demon Lord Zell, Demon Emperor, Emperor Prime, Bland Waffle, Nos Linux Gaming, Lycan Shepherd, Turtle Pier, Shadow Soul, and all other generous channel members for your continuous support. We see each other, hopefully in the next one, and until then, as always, good loot.